Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. With all the drama of the last few days, it's somewhat easy to forget that Lewis Hamilton is joining Ferrari in 2025. But what does that mean for Mercedes in the upcoming season? Toto Wolff has pivoted largely from talking about Hamilton's 8th title to now talking about George Russell as the new leader for Mercedes and the man to take them forward. Also discussing that as the season progresses, engineering meetings with Hamilton might have to take a different approach given the information that it could potentially take to Ferrari. What does that mean for the internal structure of the team? Have they already decided that Russell will be their priority for the new season? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, quite a lot to say on Ferrari actually. This livery they ran last year at Las Vegas might be somewhat similar to what we see on the car this season per current rumours. Giuliano De Chester has been saying quite a lot on Ferrari over the last few days. He even said that from what he's heard from Maranello for the SF-24 is actually very positive, but it depends massively on what the others have done. Every team is going to say, yep, we made good steps, made good progress, apart from Haas, who seem to be saying that their car's going to be terrible. And to be fair, some other teams have said that they don't expect to start as strong as they expect to continue. But De Chester's been talking about this in some more detail. A couple of things I wanted to dive into here from this article that are rather interesting. Firstly, on the state of the car itself and the livery that they are going to run on it. In 2 days, Maranello will stream the presentation of the new Ferrari. It will be a livery that goes against the trend and is highly, well, I think this discontinuous word, the original translation, I would say more means something more such like a regular, something like that, rather than discontinuous. So it may be unexpected or whatever exactly you want to say. With as little black, or maybe we should say carbon as possible, weight is no longer a major problem. Weight is always a problem to some degree, but the rumour is that yes, the car will be red, obviously, but it will be painted at the very least, and it might well be painted more white. I mean, the most recent season, red and carbon a little bit, but, you know, plenty of red. It's a Ferrari. This season, maybe red and white. I think most teams at this point should be pretty much at the weight limit, but some teams think, well, if we can save 3 kilograms on paint by not painting this part, that part, and the other part, we can use that as ballast and therefore gain some degree of competitive advantage. But if you look at the best cars from the last couple of years, they've been the Red Bull, the Ferrari, and those cars have more paint than most of the other ones on the grid at the moment, so we'll see how that develops. But also discussing next year's car, we heard recently that Red Bull are so far ahead of the game, they're already working on next year's RB21 or whatever, the 2025 car. But apparently that's a pretty big priority for Ferrari as well, because rumour has it chassis 676, which is this year's car, and chassis 677, which is next year's car, 2025's car, are already in the tunnel. Talking about what they're working on, but I think this is a key point for many of the cars right now, many of the different teams, is that they need to ensure that come 2025, they can put pretty much all of their emphasis during that season on 2026. This is something that has happened before. It will happen again when major regulation changes occur. The year before, the teams don't want to be focused at all on that year's car. They will be focusing fully on next year's car because that is what really counts. So as is discussed in the article, 80% of the 2025 resources are going to be set aside for the 678, which is the 2026 car for the brand new set of regulation, on which the CFD, so the simulator, can be worked on from the 1st of January 2025. So that seems to be the plan for Ferrari as it stands. They will develop this year's car in parallel with next year's car, and then during the year of 2025, the calendar year, they will put maybe 20% of their time into developing that car during the season, but most of their time will be going into the year after. So this car, the SF-24, the 2024 car, as is the case for basically every other team, this year's car is massively important because this year's car will be relatively similar in many ways to next year's car, which for some teams, Ferrari, Red Bull certainly is already being designed, but that design is being brought back earlier than usual so that next year they can focus fully on the year afterwards, which is what everyone's really getting excited for as it stands from a car developmental perspective. But speaking of Red Bull, who are expected to continue to dominate for the next couple of years, there have been lots of talks over Horner over the last few days. I'm not going to go into the weeds yet again of all these allegations and accusations, but there's been a couple of updates today which I thought were quite telling from both sides. Firstly, on the matter of Bernie Ecclestone, who has been a close confidant of Horner for some time, controversial character in the sport, of course, course, for many a reason. But apparently he has been getting very involved in this situation, as has the CEO of Formula One, Stefano Domenicali. And this is arguably the more interesting part here of the article. So I just wanted to run through what is discussed here. So they talk about everything. We talked about it yesterday that this survey or this interview, shall we say, was rumoured to have lasted for more than 8 hours. So it was a big day of questioning for Horner. It was even mentioned in the article around about here that prior to Horner's interview, other Red Bull Racing employees had already been surveyed, including the employee who made the allegations, as well as other employees such as, at least according to information from the motorsporttotal.com guys that wrote this article, star designer Adrian Newey. How about that? I mean, it's very strange to imagine that, I mean, why would Newey get involved? Unless this is, we believe controlling behaviour, whatever, is the current analysis on what these potential issues might be. So I guess they're interviewing other people that have been close to Horner to get some analysis on their perspective of Horner's management style, I guess. But yeah, the fact that Newey would be interviewed over this is interesting, especially because, I can't imagine Newey and the others are especially happy to, get involved in a circumstance like this. It might be one of those things that not pushes them out, but I can't imagine this was, on their list of items to tick off that day. And even they go on to say the following: the name of the employee who made the allegations against Horner is now known in insider circles. However, most media, including their editorial team, refrain from publishing the name to protect the privacy of the person concerned. It's pretty interesting that people seem to know who it is. I think it was also mentioned elsewhere that the belief is that this, female employee was quite, at least quite close to Horner in terms of working relationship, in terms of like managerial perspective. So not exactly an intern, shall we say, but we don't really know any more details than that. The interesting part, though, I gotta say, is on the Liberty Media involvement, because depending on what these allegations are, depending on what Horner's done, and whether these had been exacerbated to a certain extent by people internally at Red Bull that might want Horner gone, as we've discussed over the last few days, it raises questions for Formula One, because there's talk about, inappropriate, controlling behaviour, whatever you want to say. And Formula One's owners, Liberty Media, as a publicly traded company, have to be interested in what this potentially means for them. So there was discussion that Bernie Ecclestone is said to have intervened in the matter in an advisory capacity with several telephone conversations. Now, he's been quite close to Horner, and there's been debates as to whether Bernie has told Horner, maybe you just want to resign here, but we don't know if that's actually true or not, and whether Bernie's been getting involved talking to his friends to try and find a way out of this situation for Horner. That's obviously another question, but we really don't know what that's going to say. But also, Domenicali is reportedly very interested because, given Me Too and all this other stuff over the last few years in the North American stock market, there are, if the allegations should be classified in the same box, then whether they are proven or not, and even though Horner is presumed innocent, of course, in this one, it raises questions what that might mean for Formula One, right? If there is some implication, as there has been in the media, arguably started by Jos Verstappen or whoever might have told Eric Van Haren that this was actually going on behind the scenes, then it would imply that from Formula One's perspective, they might also not be happy with a man even accused of such things that he might not have done. We simply don't know. And that's why innocent until proven guilty is very important. But, the way things work nowadays, cancel culture, whatever you want to say, we find ourselves in an environment where even such accusations against Horner have certain repercussions on his reputation, and therefore that's something that Formula One themselves might want to think about. So there might be even more pressure on Red Bull to, dismiss Horner than there might have been otherwise. So just yet another angle on this story that I thought was interesting to note. But Lewis Hamilton is joining Ferrari, and this news has not been, downplayed. It's massive news, probably the biggest sporting news of the year, but there's been plenty of other drama in Formula One over the last few days. The big question many have, though, what does this mean for Mercedes going forwards? The big talk from Toto Wolff was, over the last several months, about Hamilton getting the 8th title, fully behind Lewis Hamilton. He was actually not ignoring Russell, I would say, but there were interviews that came out where Toto said that, we really believe in Lewis, we want to get him the 8th title, and George was, kind of like the backup act. As soon as Lewis decides to leave, all of a sudden, the narrative at Mercedes changes to, well, George is a great leader, it's been a good time with Lewis, but there's no more talk about the 8th title or anything like this, because, maybe it's possible still at Mercedes this year if they have the car, but all of a sudden it feels like Hamilton isn't really a Mercedes driver anymore, at least for too much longer. It's always an interesting circumstance when a driver leaves a team, but of course, they stay there for one more season, and I'm sure Mercedes and Toto are, hurt by this decision to some great extent, because it doesn't reflect well on them as a team, them as an organisation, and their potential for the upcoming seasons. So one question is, who's Hamilton going to get replaced by? Even Mick Schumacher has thrown his hat into the ring. which I think was maybe somewhat optimistic, but we'll see. There's talk about, Albon, Sainz maybe. Of course, Kimi Antonelli is another option to keep your eyes on in Formula 2 this year. Even Alonso is one of my personal preferences. I think Schumacher's somewhat far down the list, to be honest, but Russell will be their lead man on paper. This is what they've been preparing Russell for over the last several years, to step up into this position and be the number one guy. From the Williams days now to the Mercedes days, Russell's had his time alongside Hamilton. He's going to have another year upcoming. Very good qualifying performer, as we full well know, but his racecraft and his race pace on a Sunday have been called into question, and for very good reason. This most recent season, Hamilton effectively dismantled him over the course of the year in many different respects. George made plenty of mistakes, and I think there is an interesting narrative here that, Russell, at least maybe in the British media, I don't know if you guys feel this way, but Russell can make a lot of mistakes and gets criticised, but maybe not criticised as much as a guy like Charles Leclerc does for making some mistakes. But, I think George has had more, mistakes such as that than Leclerc has had, but it feels like Charles sometimes gets more criticism. But this is what Toto says shortly after Hamilton's announcement. George has the potential to be our next lead driver. He's of the generation of Lando and Leclerc and some of the others. So, Russell is trying to be their Verstappen, or to try and be their Norris or their Leclerc or whatever for the next few years. And of course, you can debate massively as to whether or not he actually is capable of doing so. I think Russell is better than people give him credit for, to be honest. I mean, he is up against Lewis Hamilton at his own team, Hamilton, for the last several years. So I think that Russell will prove to be very strong. But is he realistically going to be strong enough? That's a big debate. But also, what do Mercedes do? Hamilton is on his way out of the team. As I say, clearly that's hurt the team to some great degree. Some engineers will go with Hamilton, probably to Ferrari. That's been the discussion. But Toto Wolff and Mercedes have to figure out, what do they do? Toto was saying for the last few months, Hamilton, get him the 8th. And the feeling was, and even he said this, that he was having a conversation with Russell about those internal team dynamics. Now, Russell is never going to be one to back down from a fight with his teammate, and he's certainly not going to now. This has all been confirmed. But Toto will have to change his stance somewhat, because giving Hamilton effectively number one driver status, which it almost sounded like Mercedes were going to do this year, because 2024 is really the year that they believe they could potentially get the title back for Lewis Hamilton and get him in the 8th, and all this type of analysis they were doing. It's going to be a different story now that Hamilton's leaving, and they can't just make Russell, who's going to be their number one next year, the number two, deliberately so from the start of the season, I don't imagine. So they will have to make some sort of call. Now, Toto says, it's going to be transparent, it's going to be fair, nothing's going to change in that respect. We owe it to our principles and to our racing intent. How we go about that, I'm sure the drivers will respect it. So I don't expect they're going to favour one driver over another. There will be questions that, because Hamilton's leaving, Russell's going to be their favourite. They're going to give him beneficial strategy and pit stops and all this type of stuff. You would think that Mercedes' number one priority would be maximising results in the constructors and in the drivers where possible. So if Hamilton is, leading the championship at some point, or leading Russell by quite some margin and in a fight for the championship, you would think that Mercedes might make Russell make way, or whatever the case is, to support Hamilton's goals. And you would imagine that would still be the case. But you never really know, do you? Because if the team is frustrated with Hamilton's decision, Lewis is on his way out of the team, maybe there's some friction there internally developing. We know that the Hamilton-Russell internal teammate dynamics are already questionable enough after what we've seen on track over the last couple of years. I think there's a very plausible case that the way Mercedes treat Russell and Hamilton on track will be at least significantly different now to what they would have done before this announcement, and potentially significantly different to what you might expect from a perfectly transparent and fair environment. The other point is as well that Toto's getting at is that as drivers are about to leave, there's concerns that if you bring Hamilton into an engineering meeting where they're talking about the 2025 car, the 2026 car, do you really want Hamilton to be in there when he could potentially bring that information to another team? So Toto says, I have no doubts on Lewis's integrity in terms of sharing information. We want this to be a successful season for both drivers and a successful season for Mercedes. But he does say that it is a conversation to be had about development going forwards and, engineering debriefs and meetings that Hamilton might be excluded from, whereas Russell is invited to. And that also changes the dynamics of what happens on the track as well. So I think that it's quite clear that since Hamilton's announcement of joining Ferrari, the narrative from Toto has changed quite substantially from Lewis is the guy that we're supporting to go all the way and win this championship to, well, we're going to treat the drivers fairly, and in certain elements, Hamilton's going to be discounted, at least from the engineering perspective, and Russell's going to be the new leader, the new number one in certain respects. And also, what does that mean on track? Because, Russell is going to believe going into this year that he's already the number one guy, I think, in some respects. He's forecast to be the number one driver, whatever he might potentially say. And I think that might change his own perception of how he acts on track as well. I don't think he's going to, like to yield to Lewis or anything like that, given those internal dynamics. So I think it's going to be a fascinating season, even if the Mercedes isn't massively competitive compared to the Red Bull. The dynamics already between Hamilton and Russell this year, I thought were going to be really interesting. And I think that's only exacerbated given this most recent announcement of Hamilton on his way to Ferrari in the near future. Just one final thing to mention for you guys. We saw a few days ago the Chicago Grand Prix is probably going to be happening. And as I actually mentioned at the time, they were going to try and tell us, and maybe they're actually being legit on this one, but they were going to try and tell us that it's not going to be a street track, guys. It's going to be a hybrid track, which is what they said about Madrid. Or it's going to be a European-esque track. But apparently, the organisers of the Chicago Grand Prix, which apparently is going to happen in the near future, are trying to prioritise the racing over the show. They reveal that the planned Grand Prix will be European-esque, which will combine elements of loved European tracks into the planned street tracks. There you go, baby. It's another hybrid track. I knew it. I knew what they're going to come up with here. But look, this is what they say. The track will go around Soldier Field Stadium and consist of a general mix of low, medium, and higher speed corners, prioritising medium speed ones to optimise overtaking opportunities. Which might be a bit of an oxymoron, to be honest, because really you get overtaken opportunities by long straights and then low speed corners where, there's big braking zones and therefore changes in positions are possible. Medium speed corners often don't have big braking zones and therefore fewer overtaking opportunities. But, we'll see. We don't even know what the track layout's going to look like yet. I will say that if Miami is to disappear and Chicago comes in, that's fine. Probably whatever they do at Chicago is going to be better than Miami. If we have to have Miami and Chicago and they replace an actual good track somewhere else on the grid, then I'm not going to be happy about it, to be honest. But very much intriguing your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. Again, so many new subs over the last few days. Massively appreciate all the support. Thanks for watching. Take care and I'll see you next time.